It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. Just been treated to a sound check. Oh, we're going to rock out this morning. You want to stick around for that. But right now, let's get serious for a second and talk legal matters, starting from this 1st of May 2021, which is around the corner. And of course, coincidentally, Workers' Day, proposed new laws will go into effect that will take the minimum wage of restaurant workers, adjust their remuneration, as well as require restaurants to pay more operating costs. And in the time of lockdown and multiple alcohol and curfew restrictions, this news understandably is not going down too well within the industry.
Yep, now it's time for another edition of our feature where we focus on the unconventional side of law. It's called So Now What? And we're calling once again upon the legal guidance of our friend and expert in law, Director at Legalese.co.za, Eitan Stern, to answer the question, am I required to pay restaurant workers more? So now what?
So now what? So now what? And you would think on the surface of it, good changes.
Sure, yeah.
Because we want workers to be remunerated fairly,
Yeah.
but also it's a complicated system at the moment. Restaurants are shutting down weekly.
Yeah.
It's been heartbreaking just to see on Instagram, for instance, how many restaurants that were proudly displaying their wares have now been taking us through their shutdown. But before we get into the emotional side of the conversation, what are the proposed laws that will be coming into effect?
Cool. So there's been what's called a bargaining council agreement for these new restaurant regulations. And what it essentially says is restaurants are now required to pay their staff a minimum wage. There's certain bonuses that have to be paid. They have to contribute to a provident fund, which is like a retirement insurance for their employees. And there's certain other requirements that restaurants have to do. So what it does do, the agreement, it does mean that the operating costs of restaurants goes up. But it also means that workers get paid more. So you're going to find in all these discussions around labor in South Africa or anywhere in the world, it's always going to be a balance between the two things, labor rights and business operations or business owners' rights. So this conversation fits as a balance between those two things.
I want to follow up on that statement with a double-barrel question. The first one is, why is it important for businesses to adhere to this new law? And secondly, what is the back and forth between the two systems that you just described now?
Sure. So minimum wages are put in place so that, because if you allow people, well, there's different views on this, but the view is that if you allow people to pay workers what they want, they'll pay as little as they want. So government steps in and creates these minimum wages and says, look, in this industry, here's the minimum that you have to pay people. Why is it important that people obey the laws? Well, I think laws in general, it's important that people obey them, otherwise society can turn to chaos. But it also means that these industries are governed. These bargaining councils are set up which look at the industry. They have participation from workers, trade unions, business owners, and they make decisions that govern the industry. So they're meant to be for the good of the industry, so that the industry is managed as a whole instead of in a piecemeal fashion.
What happens to restaurants that don't comply? You've spoken about the bargaining council, in this case, for fast food restaurants, catering and allied trades. And you would think that it would be a good step forward.
Sure.
Are they designed to protect the industry, protect the restaurants, or protect the worker?
So great question. So bargaining councils are set up essentially to protect all of them. So it's a group that's set up which is made of a combination between all of them, and they're supposed to have about 50% of the industry. They're supposed to represent about 50% of the industry in each bargaining council, which means that they come up with a solution which is meant to be comfortable for everyone. Obviously, this one is quite controversial right now because, again, it sits in this balance. Restaurants are hurting and shutting down, which is terrible. But also workers are hurting and people haven't made money in a long time. So there is a question about whether this does represent the industry and whether it is a good thing. And that kind of is a matter of opinion and where you sit on the spectrum about what you feel is more important at this time. Should restaurants be increasing their costs, which will get passed on to us as the consumers, in order to make sure that workers are paid more? Or should they keep costs as low as possible in order to entice us to come back to restaurants and then keep the jobs? So, I don't know the answer. I'm not a labor economist, but that's the question which everyone has to ask.
And ultimately, the restaurants need to stay open to provide the jobs in that process. So it's a very dynamic situation. Raise tips to 15%. That's what I'm saying. We're going to continue this very important discussion that affects so many businesses and so many workers during a critical phase here in South Africa. Eitan's going to stick around.